How to build your first financial plan. Step one is we need to determine what are our goals and what are we laser focused on. So I love to start it off by asking, what are you laser focused on personally, professionally, and financially over the next 12 to 24 months, in the next 5 to 10 years, and then maybe 10 to 20 years in retirement. So I really like to break it down into those 4 time frames: short-term, mid-term, long-term, retirement. And so take a pen, take a piece of paper. What am I focused on personally, professionally, and financially? What do I want to see happen in my personal life? Do I want to buy a home? Do I want to get debt free? Do I want to start a business? Work on getting a promotion at work? Do I want to travel more? These are just all things that you need to know, because finances are such an underlying part of our life that you need to just be thinking of everything in your life. And so that is step one. Break down your goals and what you're laser focused on. This is going to allow us to build the framework for how we need to build and structure your financial plan. The next thing that you're going to do is you are going to think about your past and your bringing up when it comes to money. What were you taught about money? What fears do you have about money? What good and bad habits do you currently have with money? Okay, next thing we're going to do in order to build a rock solid financial plan, we are going to take a pen and a paper and we are going to write out assets and liabilities. We got to build out the balance sheet. So as far as your balance sheet goes, you're going to start with cash or savings. How much are you sitting on in your emergency fund, in the bank, in cash, money that you could access in the next 1 to 2 days if an emergency were to happen? How much liquid cash or liquid dollars do you have access to? That is the first thing that we're going to figure out. Once we figure out that, we're going to start breaking down our assets. Okay, investment accounts, 401k, brokerage accounts, crypto accounts, other midterm investment accounts that you have. Next thing is our retirement accounts, 401ks, Roth IRAs, traditional IRAs, pensions, maybe some annuities. What other assets do we have or are we currently funding or putting money into? Next, real estate. Your primary home, your primary residence, maybe some rental properties. What is the value or worth of these? And just ballpark. It doesn't need to be dollar for dollar, but we need to get it within a couple $1,000s to get a good idea of what our assets are. Then from there, we're going to start focusing on our liabilities. What debts do we have? Car loans, student loans, our mortgage, credit cards, medical bills. The list goes on and on. You're going to write down every single one at a time, of what you owe and how much time you have left owing that amount, or what your payment is. Once we have your assets and liabilities built out, let's now move into your cash flow situation. So to begin, let's start with your income. What do you bring home net of taxes, net of 401k? What is hitting your bank account every single paycheck? And is this coming in once a month, twice a month, whatever it is? Write down income and write what that monthly amount is after tax. And now here comes the fun part. We are going to write down with a pen and a paper what our expenses are line by line. So rent or mortgage payment, your car payments, your credit card payments, all of these different things. And the reason why you're doing it one by one is because I want it to hurt. I want you to realize how much money you're spending. You can have AI softwares take a look at all your credit cards, take a look at all your bank statements, and it'll do this for you. But you need to tangibly feel and understand where your money is going. Now that we have our income minus expenses, if we have a little bit left over, ask yourself, do I feel like I have $500 a month left over, or is that leaking somewhere? Where is that going? The goal is we need to start capturing this amount of money to start fueling our financial plan. If there isn't anything left over, then we need to take a look at our expenses, and we've got to figure out how are we going to cut our lifestyle down to allow us to start scaling and to allow us to start working on our goals. That's why we started with the goals at step number 1, because if we have goals to travel, to buy a home, or to do some of these things that require money, but we get down to your balance sheet or to your income statement and you don't have any money left over, I hate to tell you, but you're never going to accomplish those goals unless you make the changes that you need to. And so this is why it's personal financial planning, because nobody can do it for you. At the end of the day, it's you versus you. Now that we have our income laid out and our expenses laid out, and we have a good idea on the cash flow, this is where we're just gonna break down how much are we currently saving or investing for those future goals. How much are we putting into the 401k? How much are we saving into those brokerage accounts, crypto accounts, whatever accounts that you have? Rule of thumb, you need to be investing 20% of your income in order to be on track for retirement. Now, if you're younger, that number's a little bit less, and if you're on the older side of things, that number is going to be a bit higher. But if you are in your 20s to 30s and you start socking away 20% of your income every single month into simple investment strategies, you're not putting them into speculative investments, but you're simply putting them in index funds, mutual funds that have averaged 7 to 10% over the last 40 years, you're going to be able to retire at the same lifestyle that you're accustomed to today. So if you're accustomed to making or living off of $100,000 a year and you're socking away about $20,000 a year into your retirement plans, when you retire, you're going to comfortably be able to live off of $100,000 a year adjusted for inflation and never run out of money and be just fine. What you're going to do is you're going to take your income and times that by 20%. 100,000 times 0.2 in the calculator, you're going to get $20,000, and you're going to divide that by 12, and that is your monthly amount of money that you need to be putting away into different things. And we already know what your income is, we know what your expenses are, and now we know, is this possible? And this is really the first step of financial plan, is taking a look at the mirror, taking a step on the scale and seeing where are we at financially? What does our financial health actually look like? Are we doing better than we thought, or are we actually doing a lot worse than we thought? Okay, the next part to building your financial plan, we've went over your goals, we've looked at income, expenses, assets, liabilities. Now we're gonna take a look at some of the planning that you maybe already have in place, which is we're gonna look at your insurance planning. So you're going to walk yourself through, what have I done as far as insurance planning? Health insurance. What plan do I have? What am I currently doing? Life insurance. How much coverage do I have? With the life insurance, you need to determine how much coverage you want. People will say you need to figure out how much you need, but really life insurance is a want because it's relatively so cheap and inexpensive for the amount of money that you can pay for the amount of coverage that you can get. If you're healthy and not 60 years old, you can get a good amount of coverage for a very reasonable price. What most people want to do is they want to replace their income, get all their kids to school or college, and make sure that their spouse never has to worry about money again. And really what you need to determine is, okay, insurance planning, your health insurance. What kind of coverage do you have? High deductible plan? Do you have an HSA? This is probably highly tied to your employer. The next part of insurance planning that's absolutely crucial, life insurance. What types do you have and how much coverage do you have? How much is through work and how much is personal? Typically work will give you 1 to 3 times your salary without doing a medical screening. But the downside to having all your coverage through work is if you change employers, you lose that coverage. And so every single time you change jobs, you've got to reset your coverage or get new coverage. And so I highly recommend that you should just get 95%, 100% of the coverage that you need through a personal policy or a personal plan, because it stays with you for the term of that policy. There are different types of life insurance, but for the sake of this conversation, we just need to focus on what is the amount of coverage that you need. For me and for most people, they want to make sure that their spouse never has to worry about money. Because I am the financial breadwinner, I don't want her to have to go back to work if she doesn't want to. Financially, she doesn't have to do anything. Financially, she's taken care of. She simply does things because she wants to. I want to make sure that my kids are taken care of with college and a wedding, and love to give them a tiny little nest egg for maybe a down payment on a house. And really, those are the two big things that I just want to worry about. And so I'm going to take my current income and I'm going to say, okay, currently we are making, for the sake of this example, $100,000 a year. I just want to make sure that my family has $100,000 a year until my wife gets to retirement. And really the simplest way is I'm going to use the 4% rule. So the 4% rule is if you were to take 4% out of an investment account, you would never run out of money and you could live off of that 4% every single year. So if you had $1 million, technically you could take out $40,000 a year and you would never lose that $1 million. You would keep the principal intact, but you'd be able to write yourself a check for 40 grand and it would just stay at $1 million for forever. So in this scenario, if I wanted to replace $100,000 a year, essentially I'm going to need about $2.2 million of life insurance coverage, probably closer to 2.5. But that's also considering that they never touch the principal, which I don't really care to leave $1 million behind. But give or take, I need to have about $2 to $2.5 million in order to replace my income if something were to happen to me and ensure that, my kids are taken care of. But you're going to take that. Usually you can even do 10 to 20 times your income. There's a lot of different methods to this, but it's just simple math. Sit down, walk through it, because you can never go back and make sure you have the right number in place. It's something you got to do before you die, obviously. So that is the insurance planning. The other crucial piece of insurance planning that I think is often overlooked is your LTD, or the long-term disability, that is oftentimes provided through work, or you can also get that through a personal policy. If your work provides it, typically they will cover 60% of your salary, and then you can go get a personal policy to cover that other 40%. And when people think that when they hear the word disability or disabled, they think that they're in a wheelchair, they're in a coma, and they're not really able to do anything. But a long-term disability could be cancer, it could be a mental illness, it could be a broken leg if you're a construction worker, and really it kicks in if you cannot work for more than 3 months. This will kick in and start paying your income that you've lost because you can't work right now. And so very inexpensive compared to the value that it can bring to your financial plan to just know that, hey, if I'm sick or I can't work, we're still gonna be okay financially. And this is why financial planning is just so important, because you can't control what happens in life, but most of the time when bad things happen, the first thing you think about is the financial consequences. And so if you can alleviate that, life is going to be way less stressful. And also, just going through this financial plan that we've built or structured, you're just going to have a way better grasp on your finances and understand what you can and can't be doing, what you can and cannot afford with your money, and what you need to be doing to accomplish your goals. It is just math at the end of the day. We want to buy a house in 5 years that's worth $500,000 and we want to put down 10%. Okay, you need to come up with a down payment of $50,000 over the next 5 years. Run the math for 5 years. How much do we need to save a month? Divide that. It is not that hard. It's just we never sit down and make a plan. Okay, now that we've walked through some of the insurance planning, this is going to give us a good high-level overview of a financial snapshot of what your world looks like. And this is where now you can start focusing on what do we need to start working on. The first thing I would prioritize is your high interest debt, the credit cards, things that are accruing interest. The next thing I would look at is how do we maybe reduce some of our spending or make sure that our expenses are not higher than our income. Another part of a financial plan that I think is never talked about by all the gurus out there is our income at the level that we need it to be to accomplish our goals? Or do I need to look at going back to school and getting a better education? Do I need to look at maybe finding a new job? Do I need to acquire more skills? Do I need to ask for a promotion? Do I need to level up in any way so that I can earn the money that we need to provide for these goals? Because sometimes people will always say that there's really two types of people. There's people that have a spending problem, but then there's a lot of people out there, they just have an income problem. They don't spend a ton of money, but they're just not making very much money to even pay their bills. And I think that is a very fair and accurate point. Now, when people are making $200,000, $300,000, $500,000 a year and they still are living paycheck to paycheck, that's a spending problem. But if you're trying to get ahead financially and if you're trying to get ahead financially, the best way to do it is to raise your income but keep your expenses level or barely increase them, because then you're going to have that difference that you can then save and invest towards your goals. So hope that was helpful. That was a quick snapshot or overview how to build your first financial plan, and this will help highlight where you need to start so you can start working on your personal financial plan.